Today we're focusing on learning, specifically this flipping your training needs analysis. There's so much changing for colleagues out there and their expectations and their experiences and their mindset. This is about listening into that, hooking in, giving people and colleagues a chance to express themselves, so we or people who might be able to help them can then react and respond to that and do as best we can to give them what they need. And I realize there's massive shifts both sides of that fence, both for their expectations and also for the organizations. If you want to find out more about our engaging learning offer, the site is now clearly set up to support you in that. So you can go to yourbigpick.com/learning, and learning is one of our 4 offers next to change, performance and onboarding. So if you want to hear me talking about the general learning offer, go off and have a look at that. So one of these conversations that we're about to have, maybe even an experience, is intended, and what it achieves is an interesting and an insight into where the colleagues are. And this indeed would be something that you might do if you're looking to flip your training needs analysis. You would go out to your people and ask them, and it would be quite a personal request for them to think about where they are in the business, how they're finding things, where they see themselves, etc. And I'm going to take you through exactly how to do that. So those symbols are intended to mean something. This is how Big Picture works. So when you pull out the resource drawer, you'll see that there's a symbol there for team, which we're going to use today. There's a yellow customer symbol and a yellow customer journey line running left to right. There's a blue technology symbol we may not touch upon so much today, a black measure symbol, which we will touch upon. There's money and process, which might not get so much of a treatment. The idea is that by understanding these symbols and giving them to our colleagues, they're really easy for them to pick up. And I find that once they've got the meaning of those symbols, it's really easy for them to then join the dots between those symbols. And that's really exciting. And it's really exciting because the magic, it really comes alive when we give to our colleagues something they can make and do, and they start expressing what I call useful truths. And that's how we all work. It doesn't matter about your background, your educational background, or anything else. It's actually about them being in the moment and making connections. And welcome to Christina. I'm really pleased you've got in. I hope you've got into the digital board, Christina. If not, try and follow along. And as I give some tasks to people, I'll have a chat with you about getting in. But welcome to the session. So the board is laid out. If you look at your board, if you've got it in front of you, the board is laid out, again, intended to be straightforward. At the center of the board, you have what I've put on there as operations. That's where the value is created. That should have some alignment with what's at the top of the board, which is the purpose of the business. So you have the purpose and the operations as kind of the green tint, and it's intended to create a connection. You then have a lovely customer journey line, and that is the individual or the party, the business that you're adding the value to. And if you want to, if for the example that you're thinking about, you want to change the name of that customer, if you left click twice on the yellow symbol, you'll get a little pen and you'll be able to write in a different name for that customer, because it might be somebody else. You might call them clients. You might actually want to name the customer that you're talking about. It's very straightforward, the board layout. It's got the value creation at the center, the marketing and sales to the left, customer care or some form of care, after sales care to the right. At the top, partners and suppliers, and at the bottom, management and administration. The whole idea with Big Picture is it's laid out in a way that everybody can interact with and get involved with. Just whilst you're navigating that and maybe moving some symbols around, Christina, have you been able to get into the board? She's just on mute.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I have. Thank you very much.
That's great, Christine. It's great that you've joined us. So I'm going to refer to the board, and I'm pleased I know you're in there so I can help. You've all got individual boards on this session. This is a different kind of session. Normally, I give you all a board each, one board between everybody, and it becomes a big collaborative board. But there's a reason why I haven't done that on this session, because we're going into step one, and step one of the flipping the training needs analysis begins with some communication out to your colleagues, in this case you. So I may have emailed you, or I may have spoken to you and said, we have a discussion coming up in the next week or two, and the expectation is we're going to talk about how you are at the moment, where you're sat in the organization, the challenges that you have. And I've made available to you a form of big picture, which could be the physical kit, which, if you follow me on screen, is like the stuff hanging up, a box like this, that's a delegate kit that they may have received in the post. Or indeed, if we're working remotely and we wanted to be collaborative, they would have received a link to the digital kit, which is what we're in today. And it's really great there are so many of you in there. Now, this could be done one-to-one, so we could be having this discussion one-to-one, or what I'm actually quite excited about, what we're going to do today is simulate. I'm going to ask you and lead you through a conversation, but you're all working on your own boards. And why that's important is because it solves the issue of timing. So a lot of organizations say to me, we can't go to this level of depth and personalization because we don't have the time. And the story is, you can have the time if you use a framework which pushes out the work to all of your colleagues. And I'm going to give a general overview. So we're going into the conversation now. What I would ask you to think about, you're in this case the learner, and I'm the learning lead, and I'm going to be interested in the kind of training and development that I can offer you. So what I'm going to ask you to do in your board is I want you to think about a role where you've experienced a challenge that some learning could have helped with. And what I want you to do is take your team symbol, which has got your name on it, and I want you to think about the organization that was, and I want you to move that team symbol to the area of the business where you were operating at that time. So you may have been in a management role, in which case you put that to the bottom of the screen, bottom of the board. You might have been operating in operations. You may have been in marketing to the left, or customer care. So I'm just going to leave you in a minute to think about, and if anyone's got a question on that, it might help others on the call. So please shout up and ask me for any clarification. Has everyone been able to move their team symbol to a place on the board that makes sense to them?
Yeah, just clarify. So, say, in terms of what type of things would you expect people to put on as kind of the learners?
So the learner, if I was a colleague, if you were a colleague, Rod, if you were working in marketing, simply pick up your Rod team symbol and move that team symbol into marketing. There's it is obvious why you're doing that, but actually you're taking action. I have activated you, if that's the right word, to do something active. So it just gets the conversation going. And that's all I'm asking you to do for now. It's very straightforward. There is no tricks. There is no right or wrong. It's where do you see yourself in the organization? In fact, it's that straightforward. When we send out these delegate kits at the back, these ones, we actually maybe put it on a prompt card and say to them, it's that straightforward. You could get started with that step now. I call it an activation step. It's basically, who are you and where do you see yourself? Really straightforward. And with that in mind, if everybody's done that, and I'm purposefully at this point not looking at the individual boards, so I've got tabs open with all your boards, but I don't want to be distracted by this because I think the facilitation is really important. I am guiding you, and it's down to you guys to express yourself. Now let's move on to the next step of that. I talked earlier about a challenge that you might have had. Now we're just going to start with one challenge. And what I'd like you to do is to take that yellow challenge symbol that I've put on your board, and I'd like you to just move it next to you where you've put the team symbol. And if you double click it with a left click, you can change the text in that challenge. And I would like you to describe that challenge in a way that makes sense to you. You don't need to write a paragraph. All I'm looking for is a snippet of 3 or 4 words that represents that challenge to you?
It's not changing for me, Martin.
If you, is it?
I am trying to.
You just go click up the
because
pen.
because it's on a tablet. I don't have right or left click.
Ah, that's okay. Which one is it? What? That's fine.
Just the challenge.
Yeah, that's going to be a struggle. I think I could change it. Could you? Let's do this, Hugh. What would you describe that challenge as? If you don't mind sharing.
The challenge. No, I don't mind sharing at all. The challenge that we had was that we needed to have people attending work when they were supposed to be attending training. So we came up with the Smart School Initiative, whereby they could go to work, then they would do their coursework prior to coming to the class, and the class was used for consolidation rather than for introducing the training.
And where were you working in that business?
In Saudi Arabia, on an oil refinery.
Excellent. In operations or management?
I was in management. I was the training manager, and these were apprentices going through the programs.
Fantastic. So what I've done in yours, you can probably see here, I've just helped you out with that, and that's fine, because that's a situation where you might be talking to someone who hasn't got full access or full understanding, and that's fine. We are trying to activate the learner and give them something to make and do. But if that doesn't work, we can jump in and help them. What I've done there is I've jumped out in and helped Hugh. And if we had a bit more time, I would probably take some time out to fix things technically, so he could be more active, but that's fine. And it's very easy to just discount people, but that's not the way we work. It's all about helping people along. And just as earlier, Michelle helped out by sharing insights. That's important too. So often through our facilitation, we'll ask peers to help each other, because actually it's important for people to help each other out. It's kind of the way we roll. So on your board now, you should have you positioned in a particular area of the business, and you should have maybe a challenge next to you, a challenge that you experienced in that role that you think learning could help with. Now, at this point, I'm not going into a massive amount of detail with it, but what we would do is use the other symbols to enrich that understanding. So what I mean by that is, if you pull out the resource drawer on the left, I would encourage you as a colleague to think about, was this challenge that you had in any way linked to the customer, the yellow customer symbol, and the yellow customer journey line that goes across the page? And I don't need you to answer verbally. I want you to just think about it. And if you think that challenge was closely related to the customer, the person or body that you were giving the value to, then what I would like you to do is to move that to the yellow symbol, the yellow customer journey line that runs left to right.
Yep.
Okay. And if you don't think in any way it was related, then pick up your team and your customer your team and your challenge and move it away from the customer journey. What I'm wanting to encourage you to do is think about the relationship between that challenge and the customer. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's all about gaining an insight. And I think I can activate you all, as you could, by giving you a general prompt, and you're all doing something different in your boards that I'm not even peeking at. And that gives you ability to engage with teams of 10, 15, 20, all at the same time, and make it personal. It makes you incredibly productive and efficient in the way you go about your work. I'll probably jump across to a couple of the other symbols. I would say to you, back in that resource drawer, could you consider, let's jump to measure, because I really want to cover this one. I would like you to think about 2 measures. I would like you to bring on 2 measures, and I want you to bring on a measure that you think would help you understand whether this challenge that you had was actually getting any better or not. So how would you achieve success if you were to overcome this challenge? What measure represents what good looks like for you? And this is for you. This is activating you to think about what measure might regard success. So I don't know if anyone wants to offer an example and I could maybe help them with the measure. Is anyone willing to offer that because they've got an answer or they're struggling? If they're struggling, it's more fun if you don't mind sharing.
Do you want me to continue what I was talking about?
Yeah, go for it, Hugh.
Because obviously as a measure, we were using tests. All the apprentices were going through an apprenticeship program. So having had a previous year where everybody was in class, not in work, we were able to align the previous tests with the tests as a result of doing the Smart School initiative. And obviously any improvement that there was during their work, because they were being mentored by certain people in the field, was also a measure that we were able to use to find out how successful.
That what you've drawn out there, Hugh, thank you, is almost the next step. I think you've mentioned the next step, and that is there is a measure for you as a colleague, how you would assess you're doing. And there's also a measure for the business overall, and that's a really helpful conversation to have. It's basically saying to the colleague, and remember I said earlier, this isn't intended to be passive and light touch. This really activates colleagues to think about it. And in this case, this is a really good example. There is a measure that you as a colleague think will define success for you. And me, as somebody responsible for the budget of the organization, if this company is about producing furniture, if it's a financial services company, if it's an oil refinery, there will be other measures that I could bring in and compare to your measure, because you have something coming from the colleague and you have something coming from the business. And for me, there's got to be a compromise about how those two fit together. So the measure symbol is really important to get our head around and work with. Is that me? Is everyone with me so far? Is everyone okay?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. It's a really good conversation. It's the same symbol. Where big picture can make something simple, it does, without being any simpler. So we use a measure symbol, but we don't have different measure symbols for this, that, and the other. It's just two measure symbols that represent the business measure and the personal measure, and it creates a really accessible and straightforward conversation. For time, we're not going to go into technology, money, and process for now. But if you are having a conversation with a colleague, in all instances, in my experience, each of these symbols brings something to the conversation. So I'm going to leave it hanging. You may say to them, what systems, what technology do you happen to be using at the moment? And is it actually related to the challenge? How do you see money flowing? How do you think it affects the money flow through the business, either the income or the money going out? That one won't always be applicable. The process one pretty much always will be. How is this challenge affecting the way you go about your work? And actually you would say to I would say to you, I would be encouraging you to bring on a technology or a process symbol or both, and enrich and make connections with the challenge that you've got. Again, I'm activating you to think about something in a certain way, and it's this activation and two-wayness that actually means we're flipping the training needs analysis around. And at this point, I know we've moved at a bit of pace. We've moved through the first stage. What I would say as an absolute bonus, if you could, before we move on to step 2, if another challenge has come to you, it will make the training needs analysis part, step 2, more interesting. So if another challenge has come to you whilst you've been working as a colleague, drag on another challenge or two. And I would love to see 2 or 3 challenges on your board, because that makes the next step more interesting. So I don't know whether you can add a second challenge. And I would prompt you to think about, let's say, an area of the business that you find challenging. So you work in marketing, you don't get what the management team are doing. Pick up a challenge symbol and put it in management and say, that's a challenge for me. I don't really understand what they're doing. If you're working in operations, maybe put a challenge in marketing and say, I don't get what the marketing, I don't get how we market our products, because customers are coming through with expectations that are not set. So use that second challenge for the purposes of the simulation, to call out a different part of the business that isn't yours. And getting colleagues to think about that is interesting, because they often think they're working in a silo and they don't have an interest in the other part of the organization. Now, Big Picture is all about giving individuals a voice and also doing something with that, and everything's connected up. And this is the systems thinking connected up part. A lot of colleagues have a view as to something that's going on in a different part of the business. And that's why you could use that, that challenge to do that. Would anyone, whilst I pause for breath, would anyone like to jump in and offer an example on that second challenge?
I could do that if you like.
Brilliant, Rod, go for it.
I was going to say, one of the challenges is marketing in a world where face-to-face interactions no longer exist. So due to the COVID, everyone's turned to either spam emails or LinkedIn. So the normal ways of marketing a product have changed overnight. So it becomes a new challenge to then stand out.
So what would be interesting there, Rod, and you've got me activated now thinking how I would react to that. If that came out of the conversation and you were a colleague, what I would be thinking is someone responsible for the organization. You have given me there an insight. It's probably not just your personal view. It's probably something we should be looking at overall. You have brought a point to the conversation that isn't just about your training needs. You have a valid view and a perspective, which I call the insights, which you build up as well as flipping the training needs. You're building them insights. Michelle, I think you saw this in the room when we did it. You're building up a load of insights into the business. So your ability to not just be their trainer, but also take a load of insights to your management team is massive. So when you were talking, I was like, this is interesting. This is not specific just to Rod's needs. You are offering a view on how the whole business could be better. So I'm going to speed things up now because I don't want to run out of time. And this is the way I'm going to do the second bit. Now, you're going to have to bear with me here. I am browsing the boards and I am looking across. And what I think I might do, if it's all right, Rod, is to stick with yours, if that's all right, because you've offered it. And I can probably do two in the time.
Okay.
If that's all right. So I'm going to go, what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to go to Rod's board. And what I'm going to do is to...
Will you be gentle?
I'm going to... Absolutely. Are you okay with me sharing it, Rod?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing.
Right, so I don't want to confuse anyone now. What we're now going to do is we're going to help Rod out. We're going to do our training needs on Rod's board, okay? And I'm going to do that. I could share it with you all, but for speed, I'm just going to share it with you in Zoom. So hopefully you'll now be able to see Rod's board here. Yeah. Now, Rod, I'm just going to navigate around. Now, you'll notice this is how it's going to work. In the top right, I'm offering training, and to simplify things, I can offer 3 types of training: people skills, technical knowledge, and leadership skills. There are others, but for the purposes of this, I hope one of them is relevant. There's a process to this, which is face-to-face, Zoom or e-learning. So Rod, I want us to have a conversation. Thanks for filling this in. Can you pick one of your challenges and just articulate it to me?
So the challenge I chose was providing value for money via digital coaching and learning in a world where remote working is the new norm. So that's why I put it between the delivery and the customer care, because you still want to deliver to a high standard, but you want to ensure the customer receives a high standard.
Brilliant. So it's this one we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
This one, brilliant. I'm just going to put a new line on that. Now, so providing value for money, digital coaching, from a training, how do you think learning and training could help with that, in terms of that being a challenge related to learning? How do you see, what could I do, what could our organization do to help you with that challenge?
So it'd be breakout rooms during a virtual training session.
Yeah.
Or instead of being singular instructors, you'd be having 2 instructors, so you'd be taking one person teaching, one person in the breakout room offering advice, support.
Okay, Rod, so something has just happened, which I find interesting. This happens with Big Picture all the time. If you tracked my face when you started talking, I did not know where this was going to go. And I don't want to sound like Darren Brown or Mind Read or anything, but the penny has just dropped that if I say to you, it appears there, Rod, some technical knowledge would help in order so you could use this enhanced functionality within that technology. How does that sound to you based on the challenge that you've offered?
No, it sounds excellent. Yeah.
And in terms of us giving you that technical knowledge, do you think, I'm looking at the processes in top right, do you think that would be best delivered face-to-face by Zoom or through some e-learning?
I imagine Zoom, because I think the face-to-face will be limited, so it's got to be via that.
And
Zoom,
by definition, if it is technical knowledge around Zoom and breakout rooms, then actually the way to deliver it is probably through Zoom because it's self-fulfilling. So I'm not going to have time to do a lot of examples, and this isn't scientifically proven in any way. But by the look on my face, I didn't really get the challenge that Rod was talking about until I listened intently. I then realized what he was talking about was some technical knowledge around Zoom, and then we discussed the method to deliver that, and we could repeat that cycle a number of times. And to speed things up, because I always like to finish promptly, I want you to bear with me. If I put some people skills against that challenge and I put some leadership skills here, what I want to show you is the last part of the conversation could be me saying to Rod, where are the actual they've not appeared. Well, that's a technical, I don't know where they are. The fact is we would go into the opportunities drawer. Don't know what's happened there. Let me just check.
Was it me? I did not go into your drawers.
I think that's because I've probably got too many tabs open. Oh, here we are. There's this one here. So we've got the opportunities. They've not been called different things, but you can see here we can reorder them. So if these had different names, I'm in Hewell's at the moment. Hewell, if we'd changed your opportunity names here, then actually we could reorder them. So the end of the conversation is around how we reorder those opportunities. So it might be people skills or leadership skills or technical knowledge. We always end up with that training needs analysis, both identifying through a two-way dialogue the way it works and what might be good in response to that need that Rod described. And then it would be a case of prioritizing them. Now, I'm going to
ask a tough question, if that's okay.
I love tough questions. Hit me.
Right. In the military, we have something called the so what. So what does that mean? Or the so why? So if you're training this, we discussed it. So what does it mean now?
So this means that individuals, so two things. That means I have engaged with a cohort, a number of people on a very personal level in a very short space of time. So I, as a learning and development lead, have been ultra productive. That's what's in it for me. I can demonstrate that I've engaged with all my learners in a very short space of time, and I've gathered a load of insights as well. So me, as the learning and development lead, I am now ultra productive and I have lots of knowledge to hand. That's what's in it for me.
I like that.
What's in it for the learner?
Right,
what's in it for the learner? What's in it for the learner is even better. The learner has been asked finally for what they think, and they've been through a very difficult time. So they've been engaged in a conversation which feels very personal to them. They've been able to share their opportunities, their challenges that they've got in a way that they can feel like they've been part of the process. So I think it's fair to say, Rod, you felt like you'd been listened to. And, you know, I think I gave you your time to share. I didn't come to you and say, I've got 3 types of training, which do you want? That doesn't feel as rich. What I did is I talked about your challenge, and that makes the learner feel incredibly valued at a time that they must feel quite sensitive and worried about their role, if indeed they've still got a role in the way that they had one before. So there's empathy and compassion and engagement with the learner, and the learner has been able to share their top 3 challenges They were part of the conversation to identify what the organization is going to offer them in the form of, this case, technical training. And I also gave you the chance to offer what type of method of training that you prefer. So that's a bit like, well, I'd love it to be face-to-face, or I'd love it to be online, or I'd love it to be e-learning. So all through that, I was giving you as the learner the chance to be a part of and actually drive that conversation. And obviously it's a trade-off. It's about what the learner needs and what the organization can offer. And that might come down to the placement of those two measure symbols earlier to say the learner wants X and the organization wants Y. How can we put something in place? It might not even be training. It might be mentoring. It might be coaching. It might just be someone to talk to. So it might not even be a training course. So the idea there, if that answers your question, there are multiple benefits for the learning and development lead. The insight is a massive one, because the insight is a massive benefit. You gave one up on this call without probably even realizing at the time. And I don't want to overlabor it, but we get insights like that all the time, things that would make the business better. You have been fully activated and engaged as an individual, so there are benefits both sides. Is that an okay answer to your question?
No, it is. I was purposely putting you on the spot because it's, I know how tricky learning can be.
Absolutely, and I think we've got to push it out there, and we've got to create these, if I may, awkward silences and points of penny dropping, because if we don't, we're being potentially lazy, and we're just saying to people, we can give you A, B, and C, and they're just sat there going, well, again, you've totally missed the point. I don't want A, B, and C. I want a chat with someone every week who can be a mentor. I don't want training. I've had enough of training. I just want someone to mentor, and I think this process will bring it out through the dialogue and telling people what they want. I don't know, Michelle, you've been in this kind of role, so I'm not sure whether you can relate to this or kind of add to it or challenge any of it.
Absolutely. I've lived both sides of this, where you try and push out things to people. You make some broad assumptions on what people need, and you're absolutely right. What usually happens is people are disengaged. They kind of go, well, actually, that's not quite right. It's not in the way that I want it, or it's not right for me. Whereas actually, if it's that two-way dialogue, quite often we tend to start a new year with an engagement piece where we get, used to be a number of people in a room and have those kinds of coaching questions. And definitely, do we always start with what is the problem? Because usually people come, when you talk, we're L&D, they'll come with a list of, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this.
Yeah.
And you go, well, actually, what is your problem? What's going to make the biggest impact here? What's going to change, the problems and the sticking points that you're facing, and, why is that going to help? Because otherwise you'll just end up rolling out a whole list of things. And again, it wouldn't be engaging if you've not got your root cause, analysis or the problem that you're trying to solve. So
indeed,
yeah,
and that's a lovely mention of root cause analysis is really important. Yeah, that's brilliant. So thank you, Michelle, for sharing that insight, because I know you've been in the role where you've seen both sides of the fence. So that's a really good insight. We're coming into the last 5 minutes, and what I do, by the way, 1:45, is I don't finish abruptly. What I do is I just leave it open for any related stories, but there's certain things I want to do in this last 5 minutes. I want to make sure people do come on our webinars, and the feedback I get is absolutely kind of get the experience, get the learning, but I don't get the offer. And it's almost along the lines of what you've said, Rod, is like, so what? What's the point? So I've tried to be clear on the benefits. The way we operate is, if you want to generate this kind of conversation with your team in an organization that you care about and work with, we get that coming from a standing start, using the new kit, although familiarization always helps, and practice, you might need some help with that. So what we do is we work with organizations to deliver either for them. So we would facilitate sessions. Practitioners of mine will facilitate sessions for you The intention is that in time, you upskill yourself and your team to deliver these kind of sessions. And that means becoming more familiar with the kit, becoming familiar with the symbols and the way the board's laid out. And obviously, at any point, you can take over those tools at any stage. It isn't intended to just be us delivering this. So if you go back to yourbigpic.com/learning, this is part of a learning offer. And I want to mention one thing before I end, which is if you're using this for learning and this is creating damn good conversations with colleagues, then if you look at your onboarding and your performance and your change, then it's not dissimilar to the conversations that should be happening in those areas as well. And that's also an engagement piece that we can help with. So there are benefits from actually using Big Picture in different pockets of organization because you already have the people in-house trained up. All it is, without trivializing it, is a different session plan and deployment. So there are benefits from using it in different ways, and you can find that out at the /learning piece.